Family, welcome to the inaugural edition of I'm Not Crazy, but this is a show I will be hosting each Thursday from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central Standard Time and 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. I know you're wondering why in the world would she say I'm not crazy, but I'm so glad you asked because as a board certified fellowship trained psychiatrist, so often I have family, friends, loved ones, patients say to me, I'm not crazy, but. And at the end of that but is something that is shameful, that they find shameful, that they think other people would think less of them if they heard about that. That is why this show, I'm Not Crazy, but is going to deal with the emotional, the mental health side of whatever is following that. But it may be current trends, like what's happening as it relates to people talking about DID as they run for election. It may be what happens during divorce as someone talks about having bipolar disorder, what have you. Those are the kinds of things that we will be talking about. Now, I won't be doing this by myself. I will bring in guests as well, people who are industry leaders in their field, so that we can have a conversation about things that you all are talking about. And we will say some of the things that you've been thinking about, but perhaps have not said. That's why today I want you to sit back, share. As I'm introducing our guests who are coming on, industry leaders, I do want you to rep your city and drop where you're listening in from. And go ahead and put this on your calendar because you're going to want to hear these types of topics as we go forward. Now, joining us today is Dr. Tiffany Haynes. She is the Assistant Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at UAMS. She is clinical psychologist with expertise in mental health services, intervention, development, and community-based participatory research. If you are a University of Michigan alum, I want you to go ahead and share this with all of your University of Michigan alum friends because both of our guests are alum of University of Michigan. Now, I'm alum of Hendrix and UCLA. I will not hold that against them, but we are so glad that they are here today. And we also have Dr. Kyla Holmes. And Dr. Kyla Holmes is a psychologist as well, trained at the University of Alabama, Tuscaloosa. Also did a 2-year postdoctoral fellowship in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Michigan. She has a lot of specialty in children. And so we want to talk about today the thing that plagues, it's estimated 70% of our country at one time or another, and that is drum roll, imposter syndrome. Now, I know you may be wondering, why is she leading with imposter syndrome on her very first episode? And that is because it is universal. At some point in time, at least 70% is estimated to have this. And when does this show up? It shows up many times when we're in new settings, when we're in academic institutions, when we start a new job, when we go into a place. And it's that sneaking, nagging sensation that I'm phony, that I don't belong here, that I somehow pull the wool over their eyes, and at some point they're going to find me out. Now, you may be thinking that this is just a you thing, but let me tell you, people like Tom Hanks, Michelle Obama, Andre 3000, and even our beloved Maya Angelou have talked openly about struggling with this. In fact, Maya Angelou was quoted one time as saying, although I've written 11 books, with each book, I think, this time they're going to find me out. So we want to let you know that number one, you are not alone. And number two, there are some strategies that you can use and that you will gain from this episode so that while you may have been plagued by it, you can help those that you mentor not carry this burden. You can help your children, your grandchildren, those youth that you serve, that you mentor, that you pour into. You can help them with that and you as well. So, ladies, let's dig right in. Let's talk about what imposter syndrome is and how it shows up on a daily basis.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think you summed it up when you said that you think you're going to be found out or you don't think you belong. Like I think that's a big part of it. And despite what level, we can continue to go to higher and higher levels, but at each level, it might be that nagging kind of thought or nagging feeling, feeling of anxiety, feeling of sadness, feeling of fear, feeling of worry that we don't belong, we don't fit, we don't deserve to have a seat at the table. We're not worth it. We're not valuable enough. I think that's what it looks like, and it can show up in ways that feel like fear emotionally. At least it can feel like fear, anxiety, sadness, feeling overwhelmed or concerned.
Absolutely.
And sometimes I think it looks like not being able to accept those compliments, not being
Yep.
able to celebrate those wins. So when you're sitting there and someone says, "Oh, you did a good job," and you're like, "Oh, did I really?" Or "I'm not sure I really did a good job." And sometimes it looks like that inability to really rest in yourself and say, "I got this."
Right.
Absolutely. And I'll add, sometimes there is this perfectionism that goes into it. You're a little bit afraid that you may be found out, and so you overdo it. In a clinic setting, it may be the extra that you do with your notes that sometimes keeps you from turning it in on time. It may be that extra, 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 and you're going far above and beyond what others in the setting is doing because you're trying to prove somehow that you believe that you're there. You may minimize your training and your abilities and think, oh, this is luck. This
Mhm.
is, I fooled them. This was luck. And so now I have to somehow hold on to it. And when you see that, how do you become self-aware and recognize it? Because sometimes you can be in the, even as especially as accomplished as many of the people that you know are and yourselves, you can have it and sometimes not even be tuned in to yourself. How do you pick up on that? How do you know it? Because sometimes I will catch it. I may catch it, and it's been there, and I didn't recognize. Oh, that's what that was
Mhm.
until I've indulged it a little bit.
Mhm. I think it requires, I'm just going to say, non-judgmental noticing. Like we really have to get attuned with our bodies, our emotions, and just have that as a practice, right? Some people may say that falls under the larger practice of mindfulness, but where we really are attuned to what's happening in my body, what's happening in my thinking, and to really notice it without judgment. And I think when we get into the practice of that, then we can more notice it with curiosity. Notice, oh, there that goes. There
Mhm.
that is. And because it may start with a kind of butterflies in your stomach. It
Mhm.
may start at just kind of feeling kind of stuck or feeling like I don't know what to do next, right? So just noticing that and then having some emotional vulnerability and being able to just be open to what that might be with, again, with curiosity instead of judgment. And then you can maybe position yourself to be able to see it.
That's a really great point. Tiffany, did you want to add anything to that?
I think, self awareness is so great, but I also like to surround myself with a village that can see it before I see it
Mhm.
sometimes. And
Yeah.
so those village people who are able to say, hey, you recognize that you wouldn't accept this compliment. You recognize that you are minimizing your training and you're minimizing who you are in this moment. They help me see it before I'm even able to see it myself. And they put it on their radar. So definitely work on being that self aware so that you can catch those feelings. But if you're a little bit, just starting that part, get you some friends, get you some family, some trusted village members that are going to be able to point it out for you.
Absolutely. I love that. And here's the thing. You will notice that children will barge in while you're having meetings with important people. They believe they belong at the table. They are not afraid. They don't care where you are. My husband and I were meeting someone. My daughter ran over and she was not mindful. She didn't know who the person was, nor did she care. She believed she belonged in that space. And she still does to this day. When when do we start to believe that we don't deserve a seat at the table? When does that come? Because as I'm looking at it, children run around butt naked. They're not covered up. You ask them a question. Don't ask a child a question if you don't know the answer. They will tell you the truth. We will say it nicer, and we communicate to them that they should be nicer. But when do they finally get it? And then when do we finally get it? And then start covering up or putting on or pretending or believing those things. When does that happen? I have my own ideas, but I'm interested in what you all are thinking.
Yeah, I think as somebody who works with children in a therapeutic context and working with parents, working with teachers, honestly, that can probably begin as early as at least being a toddler, like 2 or 3, because developmentally, like kids have to figure out that I can do it. You know, when kids say, I can do it my own self, you know, I can do it, I can put my coat on, I can do it. I think they're trying to build a sense of mastery. They're trying to just build that just basic human need that we have to feel like we can do it. We can master something. We can feel competent in something. We can feel accomplished, like we have that basic core need. So, if at any point, just in early development, kids get that message that even when they try to do it, they continue to fail, or they don't deserve to do well. They're not able to do things on their own. They're not valuable. They're not worthy. Just when that's starting to form in early childhood, those messages just subtly get sent. And people may not intend to it. It may not even be done in a malicious way, but somehow in their surroundings, they may get the message that they're not worthy, they're not valuable, they're not capable, or competent. So I really truly believe that at least the seeds for that can be sown in early childhood.
Mm.
I absolutely agree with that. And I want to go back to what Kyle said. Like, it's not intentional. It's not
Yeah.
that moment where people are saying, "Oh, I'm going to tell this child this so they know they're not valuable." It's just those subtle messages that are sent in your environment. It's the times when you say you can do it and then you don't do it well and people laugh. And then you say, "Oh, I don't like that feeling of rejection, so I'm not going to try this anymore." Or it's that time when really well-intentioned people are telling you, if you want to be taken seriously in this part of the world or in this industry, you have to dial back how you talk, or you have to change how you look, or you have to do these different things if you want to be accepted. And we start hearing those messages very, very early. And when you start, just like if you hear a song over and over and over again, you learn the lyrics. So the more you hear these messages, you learn these messages, you internalize them, and then they pop up anytime you're walking into a new room or into a space that's outside your normal comfort zone.
Wow. That you learn the lyrics really resonated with me when you said that. That's potent. When I asked the question in my mind, I imagined that it was somewhere around the time that you entered school, because you know how teachers set you up, right? They say this stuff like, there's no such thing as a dumb question. There is no such thing as a dumb answer, right? They say that. And then you believe them, and you give these answers, you ask these questions, and then those little terrorists around you start making fun of you, right? and and you realize that was not true what she said. There is a such thing as a dumb answer in my friends' minds, even if not yours, and there is such a thing as a dumb question. And so I think many times when you go to school or you watch TV, there are these messages that you get about what's good and what's bad. There was a study done when when these researchers asked children what was they pointed to different shades of dolls, and they asked them questions around it. Would this person be more likely to steal? Would this person be more likely to be dumb? Would this person be more likely to be smart? And across the board, little white kids answered that a certain way. Little black kids answered it a certain way as well. And it was, in all of them, though, looked at darker skinned people as not being good enough or being worse. And so as I thought about the messages that I internalized, that I saw on the tube growing up, pre-Cosby era, okay, pre-Cosby era, that those messages were the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so at school, you get certain messages. At home, perhaps you get certain messages. At, um, on TV, you get certain messages, and you don't always realize what's happening or when it happens. But then all of a sudden, the tree is grown and the fruit are falling off of it, and it looks like imposter syndrome. It looks like you rehearsing those lyrics in your mind of things that you've heard that you don't even know where you got it from.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we combat that? Those messages that, as Dr. Haynes said, we may not mean to be sending. I recall uh, my home is filled with Black art, Black books. We visit museums, history museums. And yet I remember my daughter and I were watching this movie. I think it was Bruce Almighty, where Morgan Freeman is God. And my daughter said, he can't be God. God is white.
Mm.
Now, if she picked that up and she grew up in my home where we are bombarding you with these messages, nothing but Black dolls, unless someone else buys them in our home. Where did you get this from? And so then we had to backtrack and say, where did this message come from? And so I say that as an example, not of imposter syndrome, but as an example that many times we are actively attempting to communicate you are good enough, and we're still not doing that
Yeah.
as well as we want to.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. And if I could interject, Dr. Mattox, I think one of the things that I think about with this is sometimes we actively get the negative images, even when the positive images are out there. But sometimes what can happen is that we are our aspects of our identity or who we are is just ignored and not paid attention to, right? So sometimes even in school settings, of course what we talk a lot about is kids being bullied, being actively bullied, like you said, that some kids are teasing and saying things if somebody says something they think is stupid or dumb or whatever, and then they're actively teasing them, they're actively being bullied or victimized in some ways. But another thing we know from research, just kids who are just neglected. It's like they're not even there, that people don't even see them, that they don't even feel like people even know their names or even notice them in classrooms. Even that sends a message, right? So I just want to just interject that as well, that sometimes our kids are actively getting negative messages about who they are, because of their skin color, because of their gender, because of whatever it is that's going on, because of what side of the tracks they grew up on, or however we want to think about that. But sometimes even when we've been in settings, I know I've been in academic settings where it's just like I'm not even represented, like it's not even there, like it's like I'm a non-issue, you know what I'm saying, like a non-factor. So that also sends another message. Even if I saw in other settings positive images about me, if I go in the setting in which I really want to show up, it's like, oh, this is where I feel like I need to be. And now I'm in this setting, even though I've been in this other setting before and that was good and resilient and that gave me all the good feels that I need. But now I'm in this setting where I want to operate and flow and I don't see representation of me. And so now well, maybe I don't belong here. I read an article and they said even Black women go in these academic settings and such, and then on the wall you see all the people who've been in leadership. Who are they? White males. So then we may think, even if we have been, people have been saying positive things about us in other settings, it's like, but in this setting, in this building, in this space, white men are elevated. And then it makes you kind of have to go through that process of wondering if you belong.
Yes. And it's
Yeah.
interesting that you said that, because I remember having a conversation with a very prominent attorney in her region, in her organizations, just doing some amazing work. And I was having a conversation and I said, I bet they don't know what to do with you. And she
Mm-hmm.
said something that I will always remember. And she said, no, that's not it. And she told me she felt invisible there,
That's
that
it.
they did not acknowledge her presence. And it was because she has such a strong voice, because you feel her presence when you're in the room, because she has something valuable to add. It baffled me that she would say they didn't see her. And so I'll pivot just a little bit, because sometimes when you feel like the imposter in the room, when you're at the table, you may not use your voice. And you may not use your voice because when you said your idea, and every woman, Black or white, has experienced this. Probably every minority that's been at one of those tables has said something, and then it wasn't acknowledged. And then you get in your head for a moment about what do I do? And then someone else says very close to what you just said, and then it seems brilliant. And
Yeah.
so you get into your head to where you're like, what is this? And you miss a part of the meeting because you're in your head trying
Right.
to decide. And then some people get angry, and the anger comes out, but some people retreat. And so while they may be at the table, they're not using their voice at the
Mhm.
table.
Mhm.
I wonder if that is a part of the imposter, if that fuels or feeds the imposter syndrome as well. Any
Mhm.
thoughts?
I think it can, but I also want to say sometimes when we are in settings and we feel like an imposter, we have to remember we feel like an imposter because that system or that table wasn't built with us in mind. So we
Yeah.
kind of are the imposter because they did not build that system thinking about us.
That's
Mhm.
And
it.
so, sometimes we talk about this as this inner critic and these feelings that are not true. But sometimes that imposter syndrome is actually you picking up on, oh, they don't recognize who I am because they didn't build this for me. And so
Mhm.
Mhm.
you're right that sometimes you do get quiet. Different personalities do different things. I tend to be that person who gets quiet. Oh, you're not gonna value what I say. I ain't gonna spend no more energy saying it. But I've learned that if you're going to change systems, you still have to use your voice.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
what that means is that you have to practice using your voice at home. You have to remember that the people that are sitting at the table, they may not recognize that this system that they built excludes somebody. And so being inclusive means that everyone has equal opportunity to say and use their voice. And so sometimes you have to fight for that in a
Yeah.
system that wasn't built for you. And so that takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of time. And you have to practice it, and you have to be willing and affirming yourself that when someone else says the words that you just said, that you, instead of saying, well, what did I say differently? Maybe I didn't say it clearly enough. Saying, no, my idea was good. And my idea just went fine. It's just that in this system, my voice isn't always recognized. That doesn't mean I stop talking. It means that I keep talking until they start recognizing my voice too.
For those of you who are just tuning in, I'm Dr. Rhonda Mattox, the host of the show, and we are talking today with Dr. Tiffany Haynes, who's the Associate Dean of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion at University of Arkansas Medical Sciences, and Dr. Kyla Holmes, who is the founder of Shalom and a psychologist as well. We are talking about imposter syndrome. And I love what Dr. Haynes said. You have to use your voice in a system that was not built for you. Dr. Haynes, is there anything you'd like to add to that? Dr.
Oh,
Haynes? Oh,
no,
I'm sorry. I said Dr. Haynes. I meant Dr. Holmes.
Oh.
girl, that's done. I said
Like
all
the
my
accident.
I'm just like she said what she yeah, that's No, I love it. I'm so glad though that Dr. Haynes added that part. Just kind of in preparation and thinking about what we were going to talk about today, I was reading through different information, and in one of the articles I was reading, that was exactly what they were touching on. And I'll just read something that they said and really highlight what Dr. Haynes just said. But they were saying, in addition to what we can do, strategies that we can do on an individual level to help with imposter type of feelings or the phenomenon or syndrome of imposter, feeling those imposter feelings, they said that we too, that is important too for institutions to hold people accountable for their microaggressions and racist dynamics. Right. And so that's a lot of what Dr. Maddox, what you were just talking about right then, that those kind of microaggressions, those kind of subtle slights where it leaves us in our head thinking what just happened, and sort of internalizing and making it seem like it's something that we did, that basically that's a sign that some type of microaggression, be it a racial or gender based or whatever it is, some sort of microaggression is taking place. And so I just really just reiterated it. I guess I'm really not necessarily adding, but just want to just reiterate that so we can keep that in mind as we're trying to navigate any kind of imposter feelings, because we see that with people that we work with, that we misattribute what's happening sometimes to us, and that's only going to fuel anxiety and sadness and depression, like it or burnout or whatever the consequences of chronic imposter feelings can lead to. So when we misattribute it, when we attribute the negative things that's happening to us, and then when positive things happen we try to discount it,
Mhm.
that type of dynamic is that it's just not healthy. and it doesn't serve us well. So I think to keep that in mind, that the system and the institution has a responsibility as well, is just critical.
Absolutely. And I am a psychiatrist, but another hat that I wear is executive coach. And when I'm talking with women, and most of my clients are women, many of them are Black women, but I found this across the board with women in general, the experience of not feeling heard or seen has been a universal theme that I've heard with my clients. And so one of the things that we will do is we will practice what to do when that we'll come up with a script that is compatible with their personality as to what to do when it happens again. And I've been really impressed with some of the scripts. You know, some have, you know, tapped on the invisible mic and said, you know, is this on? Maybe you didn't hear me when I said that. I'm so glad that their mic is on. And as I was saying, and then they will reiterate what they said, da 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 da. And I chuckled when I've heard that. I've had some who've been, you know, a bit more, you know, sarcastic or what have you, but I help them to come up with 2 or 3 different scripts that feel compatible with their voice, so that they don't get lost in the meeting and miss opportunities to contribute because they're in their head. Because anyone, particularly if you are Black in corporate America, you will have this feeling you have this experience at some point in time. And so preparing for those things that are very common in the field is one way that you can ensure that your voice is heard. The other piece is, you know, we talk about what their job responsibilities are, and your responsibility may be to come up with the best ideas. Now, what they do with those ideas, that's not your job, but your job is to contribute meaningfully
Mhm.
in this arena. And so be sure to do that. And then keep a record of the recommendations that you've made. And so that when this comes back, particularly if you will be responsible for the outcomes, that you can say, I suggested this and this was not happening. And as a result, these are some of the consequences. So while I don't want people to get paranoid, I do want them to be prepared,
Mhm.
you know. Now, as we're having these conversations and we're navigating this as adults, and it's challenging, how do we work with the youth that we serve, that who, and sometimes we are the ones who may be fueling this in our well-intentioned ways, we don't want people to think of our loved ones as a certain way, and so we caution them to do this and that, and we don't realize the messages that we're sending to them,
Mhm.
you know. So how do we become more intentional
Mhm.
about preparing them and being proactive, so that they do affirm themselves and believe in themselves and believe that they deserve to be in the spaces they're in?
Mhm. Ooh, that's a powerful question right there. I love that question, and I like how you said, like, I think it starts with, hopefully the adults can do that for themselves. I think they have to practice that and be in the practice of being attuned with themselves, being aware, and working that out and navigating through that themselves. But as they do that, though, then the way I really feel like what I run into with young children and teens a lot, especially the ones that are very ambitious, right? Because a lot of times, I mean, I'm pretty sure a lot of people struggle with these imposter feelings. However, I do think people who are really ambitious, who are always going to higher and higher levels, really do struggle with this. So we see this in children and teens. They just come into the world wanting to do well. They're their own, they're motivating themselves. They're so ambitious. And what we see sometimes is then they can over identify with an aspect of them, right? They are really good student who make all A's. They are a really good athlete and they do really well in their athletics, right? And so they over identify with that. And really, I've heard teens say very explicitly, some of these teens are very aware. They'll say that I am connecting my academic performance to my worth and my value. Right. And then it's like, oh, and they realize, and they're so over identifying with that, that if they even make a B sometimes, or, you know, God forbid, a C or a D, that is devastating. Not only because they experience disappointment, because it's understandable to have some disappointment if you wanted a higher grade, but then though to be just holistically devastated, I think then they realize I'm attaching so much of my worth and my value to this. So I think as adults, what we can do is help kids to see all of who they are. all of who they were created to be, and to know that they are intrinsically valuable and worthy because they exist, because they are here, they have value and they have worth. And yes, encourage them to excel and do well, but to know that this is not all of who you are,
Mm.
right? You still have value, you still have worth. So I think that could be a part of it, so they don't get into the practice of over identifying and connecting their value and worth. And that's how they can get into very unhealthy perfectionism, right? Because that's driving that. Fear is driving that, right? And so I think when they can sow those seeds early on of helping them to see all of who they are and see that their value and worth still stands, even with the B or C.
And that is such a powerful message. I so wish you could have taught my mother that. I remember my very first B in reading by Mrs. Crane in the second grade. Why do I remember that? Because I got a spanking for that B. Okay. And what you talked about was what I experienced. And let me just say, Mary Jo Mitchell and Scotland, thank you for representing. If you are tuning in, please rep your city by dropping where you're from. Also include your questions or things that you would recommend for us to share with our children, or strategies you've used that has worked. So I really like what you said. Dr. Haynes, anything you want to add to that?
I really love what Dr. Holmes said, and it reminded me of one of the affirmations I tend to use, which is you are valuable, not because of what you do, but just because of who you are.
Yeah.
And that brings that back to that I am valuable whether I get a B or A or C. And I also grew up in a home where B's were not they were not celebrated in our house because we were told you can't make A's. So, but I remember those moments of having said, you know what, you're valuable. I want you to make an A, but you're still valuable to me. And that was an important thing to hear, that you're still valuable. I also think that when we notice that we do something as adults in a child's life, it's okay for us to also apologize and say, you know what, I made this mistake. I have a nephew. He's an amazing boy, but sometimes I get very protective of him because I don't want those, as you said, the terrorists laughing at my baby. So we'll be out, and I may hold him back from going and being his full joyful self because I'm like, come back because somebody's gonna see you and they're not gonna understand, and I don't want you to do it. And I'm pulling him back, and he wants to go out, and I'm well intentioned, but I'm holding him back from really expressing his full self. So sometimes I have to say, oh baby, this is me. This is TT's fear. And I don't want to put this on you. So if you want to go do cartwheels and it's safe for you to do cartwheels, go on and do cartwheels. Even though you're not the best at it, go ahead and try it. And I will just handle whatever feelings come up if somebody laughs. But I had to control that and say, I don't want to project my understanding and my fear about how you're going to be treated on you. And I had to apologize to him and say, you know what, you are amazing. And the things that you do are amazing. And the world needs this joy that you bring. So I'm sorry that I tried to hold that joy back. And so when we're adults in kids' life, sometimes we have to recognize that we are well-intentioned, but maybe we did or said something that's going to lead to imposter syndrome, and be willing to say, I'm sorry for it and change course.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, everything you just said. And I will tell you that sometimes in our circles, we will hear people talking about other people, and then we'll internalize that. I remember some of the conversations that people have had around mothers looking great and their children looking thrown away. And so I that lyric it replayed for me. Now, some of my backstory is, my husband is in ministry. I am not a first lady, but I'm in the ranks, and I'd heard those stories, and so some of my lowlights, you'll see on Facebook everybody's highlight reel, but one of my lowlights would be that some of the worst fights that I had with my daughter was about what she wanted to wear, because on Sunday mornings she wanted to explore her creative side, and she wanted some purple pinstripes with some polka dots and whatever. And in my mind, I'm imagining the ladies at the church saying, look at her looking fabulous and that child looking thrown away. And it took me a while to realize that this fight was not about what she was wearing, but the expectations of others on us. And I was completely ruining our relationship over what she was going to wear on Sunday mornings, when I should just be glad that the child was going to church and learning something of value so that she could be a better citizen in the world, perhaps, you know. So getting having the insight to say, where is this coming from? And is what she wears to church that important for me to like crush her creativity that I've been trying to birth throughout you, that I've been harping on and wanting to add to her? But we don't always understand. So I love what both of you have said, because when we start to think about ourselves and think of our children as extensions of us, then we put these unfair burdens on them. What is the world going to think about them based on what we've heard in our circles? And that is unfair to them. Tiffany, you had so much good stuff in there. The affirmations, I think affirmations are definitely something that we should strive to declare and to speak over our lives. I am worthy. Now, family, for those of you who are just tuning in, one of the things that I did not mention about Dr. Haynes is she is a TEDx talk speaker, and the title of her talk was "It's Okay to Not Be Okay," and absolutely great. And so there will be times when we are not okay, but to not make our what we're doing a part of our identity, and our and it to be make up where our self-worth comes from. And speaking of that, I love to compliment children on their generosity, their kindness, their sweet spirit, rather than and I will compliment on your grades, but I love to talk about who they are as opposed to what they are doing, you know?
I think that is great. That is great. And if I could just highlight some, I feel like both of you all said, which I think is really good and could help others with navigating imposter feelings, is not only have awareness of when we miss it with who we're interacting with or miss it with ourselves, but then actually being willing to say something about it. Right. So even in with Dr. Mattox, what you said with the low lights, maybe sharing that, or Dr. Haynes, with what you said about you actually verbalized that with your nephew. It actually was some type of statements around it. I think doing that can show people that two things can be true at the same time. We can be flawed and make mistakes and miss the mark, or have received criticism, like in academic space. Say if we submit a paper or we do this or whatever it is, personally or professionally, we receive some not so great feedback. That can happen, and we still be people who are of value, of worth, and deserve to be at the table, and are going to be confident. Right. So they can see that, like, oh, because I really look up to this person and they're sharing with me a miss somewhere where they missed the mark, or somewhere where they, kind of made a mistake or fell short or got some feedback that wasn't so great. It's like, oh, they can both happen at the same time. So for me, that's been helpful. And I think it takes some humility to share that. But I think that can potentially help people to navigate, and particularly kids, so they can grow up with realizing that they can acknowledge their flaws and still succeed.
And I know for me, audience, these ladies are a part of a Sweet Tea and Lemonade podcast that was birthed in the midst of the pandemic, shortly around the time of the whole George Floyd incident. And they were my safe place. We would come together. It was supposed to be around a podcast. We'd come together. We tape. Some of those shows will never see the light of day, because we were snotty nosed and just vulnerable. We celebrated each other's accomplishments. We shared our lowlights, and we did it in a safe place. And so a part of, I think, creating your tribe, creating a place where you can be vulnerable and share your lowlights, is really important. I remember, we sometimes struggle with accepting praise, or even celebrating our victories, because if you're anything like me, I remember my mother saying, "Let another man praise you." And so, I was like, okay, so I don't say what I've done. But I remember one of our show members and I won't call names, but one of our show members was having trouble with us celebrating a, an accomplishment that she had. And so we did a whole episode that never saw the light of day, but it should, where each of us took turns affirming and celebrating and talking about what was great with that person. And it was so funny to see everybody's responses. I can remember each of your responses, and how uncomfortable all of us were as we were sharing and as we were receiving, and not as we were sharing, but as we were receiving the praise, because you had to sit there and not minimize your accomplishments and
Yep.
receive it. And it was so uncomfortable, but it was such a needed um, thing for us to do in the middle of the pandemic. And so this, I call this Sweet Tea and Lemonade podcast. They were my emancipation circle. They really helped just pour life into me. And I say that not just to talk about how amazing these ladies are. We're missing one, but also that find your emancipation tribe, your people who free you and let you be you in your glorified self and your suffering self and just yourself, and without judgment. Because many times if you're in faith circles, they'll say, and he's supposed to be a pastor, like they're not supposed to make any mistakes, they're supposed to be perfect. If you're in a psychiatrist or a psychologist, they'll say, and you should know better. And so people have these expectations that because we hold certain positions, we should know better, we should do better, we should be better. Well, let me just be clear. I know I should exercise frequently. I know I shouldn't have sugar cookies at midnight. I'm just saying. So we don't always execute what we know,
Right.
and it
Right.
feels good.
First of all, please do not be calling me out like that. Don't do that.
Yes. I don't know that I called you out, but as my mother said, hit dog will holler. Not you. But so as it's nearing our time to wrap up, I want to make sure that you get an opportunity to just share your 3 to 5 strategies, or 1 or 2 strategies that you would recommend for all of us flawed people who are navigating this journey called life, so that we don't get entangled with imposter syndrome. What are some nuggets for that?
I think one of the things I feel like anytime it's like nuggets I share, I feel like this applies to a lot of different conversations. But one is to extend yourself some grace, cultivate a sense of self-love and self-compassion. So like even if it has to be a practice and you really research what that is and what that may look like for you, like really just be kind to yourself. That's something my grandmother used to say when I was young. I don't know that I fully got that, but I really have reflected on that a lot in my adult life. It's like, what does it mean to be kind to myself? And I would think, why did she say that? What is that about being kind to yourself? So I would say that practicing that, know what it means to be kind to yourself, to give yourself some grace and some compassion. And that may look like celebrating small successes, right? So just acknowledge that, celebrate small successes, acknowledge and notice with curiosity how you feel, and notice times when you miss it, but notice it with curiosity and without judgment. And that's a way of practicing self-compassion in your life.
Yes, I like it. Be kind to yourself, small successes, notice with curiosity. What was the last thing you said?
Um, Man, where was that? I think it just had to do with self-compassion.
Self
Just
compassion.
really self-compassion. Yeah, and that's aligns with being kind to yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Haynes.
I think along with being kind to yourself is replace those lyrics of those negative songs that you've had for so long. And so start with those affirmations. I am valuable, not because of what I do, but just because of who I am. Find those things that really, help you celebrate yourself and help you really love on you, and practice saying those over and over again until those are the lyrics that are stuck in your head and not those negative things. I really love that part about extending yourself some grace. We are allowed to be both experts and leaders and still be learning. And so you remind yourself daily that although people may see me in a leadership role here, that I'm also still learning. I'm going to make some mistakes, But as long as I am continuing to give my best and I have more opportunities, I can go back and I can learn from those mistakes and do things better. So start with those affirmations, extending yourself some grace, allow yourself to be flawed and wonderful at the same time, because human beings are complex. We're not just one thing or the other. And that's a good start, I think, to being able to deal with the imposter syndrome. And then get that village behind you. You need some sister girlfriends, whoever, who are going to look you in your face. And when you can't remind yourself of who you are, they can tell you who you are. And they have rehearsed their list of things that they love about you, and they can able to sew that into your life on a regular basis.
Absolutely. And let me just give you, I love what she said. Okay. Replace the lyrics with affirmations, celebrate yourself, understand that you are can be flawed and fabulous all at the same time, both and that's a good thing. And I love that. And let me just let me practice. Oh yes, Mary Jo Mitchell, I'm valuable not just because of what I do, but because of who I am. Yes, we are celebrating with you, Tampa, Florida, in the house. I'm going to practice. I want you to do me this favor. Look at their faces while I'm doing it. I'm going to practice so they can see. Now, Dr. Haynes is fabulosity in human form. She can take a t-shirt and necklace and make it look fly. She can go into any Dollar General, Dollar Tree, or whatever and come out and she can string it together and make it look good. This girl has fabulosity in fashion and style like nobody's business. She can speak off the cuff and you think she's prepared forever. Kyla Holmes brings peace into every space that she is present in. She brings peace, she brings calm, she brings a sense of grounding, and she knows how to pull silver linings out and make you feel like you can do anything. Now I'm going to talk about me. I can make anybody in a room find value in themselves because I see you and I can make you feel seen and heard because I just love people. I love people. I want to. My mother was an upholsteress and she could take something with a good framework and make it look glorious. And I'm an upholsteress in the spirit. I leave things better, people better than when I first entered the room. And this is what it looks like. Now this is not what they look like when we were celebrating each other. This is their this is their
We're
on
growing.
face.
We're growing.
Yeah, we're growing and evolving. I
So,
like
so we have grown and we are doing it better now because the first time some of us looked constipated, we looked like stop, we were looking down, we were looking up and off, we just couldn't receive it. So do me this favor. And or let me say it like I said if nobody's watching. Do me this solid. Yes, I'm that old to say do me this solid. Do me this solid. And in your circles, practice saying good things about the people who are around you. And when you see them looking off, uncomfortable and constipated, say, no, darling, say thank you. And then practice in a place that is safe, being able to say something nice about yourself. I'll tell you, one of the struggles that I have that I've experienced in my life is that many times I when there was a reason to celebrate, I did not celebrate my achievements and my accomplishments, in part, not because I didn't want to, but because when I did, you would see that 2-second look of constipation and look like you don't deserve it. And so you stopped having people that you could celebrate with. Now, I'm not telling you to go and talk to the people who look constipated when you tell them you're good news. I'm saying find you somebody. When one of my girls heard that I was doing this show, she posted, we got a celebrity in the house. She shared, she sent me something. Yes, girl, that's what's up. And that's the way she talks. She did that for me or whatever. And it felt good. But sometimes we don't just not celebrate ourselves for the sake of not celebrating ourselves. When we did have those celebratory moments, somebody rained on our parade. Find your tribe that you are safe with, who does not rain on your parades, who knows how to celebrate with you, so that when you're having an off day, they can step up to the mic and say, if you don't sit down somewhere, or stand up somewhere and celebrate with us while we celebrate you, we got something for you. Put that in the corner and let's do this thing. But you need that tribe family. And I
Yeah.
think that is a part of how you get past that. Now, ladies, as we wrap up, what did you not get a chance to say that you prepared for, that you wanted to say, and you just need to get it out?
Um, since you did your affirmation, you talked about your other friends. I want to say that we are so proud of you. I actually did not realize we were doing this live. I thought we were recording. So when I got on here, we were doing a live show. I was like, look at this girl doing the thing here and bringing us along for the ride. We are so very proud of who you are and not what you do, but who you are to us. And we are so excited that the rest of the world gets to see just a little bit of how amazing that you are. You are. So thank you for having us, Rhonda, and a clap for you.
Yeah.
This new endeavor you have.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to echo that as you were talking, Rhonda, just kind of going through and just kind of saying those positive remarks about us and yourself. One of the things that I was thinking is you really do have a pure heart. I really think you have a pure heart, and I feel that you embrace. I feel like one thing I can say, I don't know if I can say it's about everybody, you, and then I've experienced this with Tiffany as well, but embracing all of me and all of who I am. And I appreciate that about you as a colleague and as a friend and just as a woman of God. And I do appreciate that. So I appreciate in the spaces that I'm in. I feel like you allow me to bring in all of who I am. So if I want to talk about the goodness of the Lord, I can bring that in. So that is one of my final thoughts, is that I appreciate you and who you are for that. And then also to give glory to God. And I say that that does help me with my imposter feelings as well, as I remind myself of who God created me to be and what it is that he designed for me to be in this earth. And so that helps me to remember that I deserve to have a seat at the table. When I remember who, like my grandmother used to say, I'm thinking of my grandmother today, I guess, but she would say, remember who and whose you are.
Yes.
Right. And then that helps me to kind of stay firm with where I am.
Absolutely. And family, I didn't pay them a nickel to say these good things about me. Thank you, ladies. I'm sending you a group hug. Family, thank you so much for joining us today on our inaugural edition of I'm Not Crazy, but this is a show that will address the dot, dot, dot behind the butt, whatever it is that you've been hiding, that you've been reluctant to talk about because you don't want to feel judged. You don't want to feel that others are thinking that you're less than. This is the safe place that we're creating so that we can talk about emotional wellness, mental health, mental illness, and all of that jazz. I am Dr. Rhonda Mattox, triple fellowship, board certified psychiatrist. I want to thank again Dr. Haynes and Dr. Holmes for joining us. You can, where can they find you if they want to follow? Do you have any professional social media pages that you want to share, websites or anything? And they're really private, so they probably don't.
Well, you've already said Sweet Tea and Lemonade, so you can all check us out on Sweet Tea and Lemonade. We're on Facebook and YouTube, and then also check me out with what I'm doing. I'm launching my nonprofit called Birthing the Gifts. Birthing the Gifts. So that's on Facebook and also on Instagram right now. So I appreciate that, Dr. Mattox, for allowing us to be in this space with you.
Absolutely. Dr. Haynes, anything you want to add?
Y'all could just follow me on all the social media platforms. It's Tiffany Haynes on Facebook and it's T Haynesy on Instagram and Twitter. I don't post often, but you can follow me, and that's the best way to get in contact.
Absolutely. And again, Sweet Tea and Lemonade is where you can find these ladies at least once a month. And thank you so much for joining us. Normally, I end my radio shows with step outside of your comfort zone and make an impact. But today, I want to just encourage you to find your comfort zone and find some people in that circle and be comfortable in that zone so that you can be your vulnerable self and emerge your best self. Carla Laster, I don't want to rub your nose in it, but darling, you definitely missed a treat. We thank you for telling us that we're fabulous, and we think you are fabulous as well. It's recorded, so go back and listen to all of it. They just gave us some juicy, delightful, delicious nuggets. I mean, it was sweet tea and lemonade good. It was pork chops finger looking good. If you vegan, it was vegan chicken good. Baby, you missed it. You missed it. You missed it. But come back at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time or 12 p.m. Eastern Time each Thursday, and you can make up the difference. Bye-bye. Thank you, ladies. Mwah.
Bye.